administration will use all the resources at its disposal to protect the lives and properties of all Nigerians.
President Buhari challenges those exploiting insecurity for political gains to show patriotism.
That we all have a role to play in ensuring that normality is restored.
National Assembly calls for more drastic measures to tackle insecurity.
If 66.666 was added across the board to the salary of public service bill, the bill will be too high for the government.
The National Salaries, Incomes and Wages Commission assures workers on the payment of the new minimum wage.
On Good Morning Nigeria today, we shall discuss the state of Nigeria's domestic airlines.
Aviation plays a significant role in the economy of every nation, and it is indeed central to the global economy as people connect from one destination to the other using air transport.
Indeed, Kirian, a lot of goods also move from one destination to the other using air transportation, which again speaks to the importance of aviation in modern economic activities.
But now, Kingsley, for a nation to boost of vibrant aviation sector, a number of things must be on the table, which must include infrastructure such as airports, airlines and aircrafts, safety guarantees, reliable connectivity, among others.
Now, the Nigerian aviation sector has certainly come a long way, and since the liquidation of the national carrier, that is Nigerian Airways, the private sector has been dominating the local aviation market. However, they are yet to meet the standards that are expected.
Now, over the years, various airlines have come and gone with no concrete solution to some of the problems that appear to be making growth in the sector slow. In short, domestic airlines are still struggling to remain afloat.
And part of the struggle, or if you like, the challenge, is evident in the way air passengers continue to experience flight delays, outright cancellations, and other inconveniences. And the problems appear to persist despite promises.
Additionally, domestic airlines are also not taking advantage of the BASA agreement signed with other countries to introduce more international flights. Procuring new airlines seems to be challenging, and their funding also is becoming more Herculean.
So this morning, we shall take a deep look at the state of Nigeria's domestic airlines as we engage experts on the issues of availability, affordability, safety, training, and capacity building, among others.
Now, how can we ensure that Nigerian airlines get a chunk of the Nigerian market as against the situation where foreign airlines are taking the profits? What is holding the much-awaited national carrier? The panel of experts we have assembled will provide answers in the course of the program. Thank you for choosing to join us this morning, of course, on this particular edition of Good Morning Nigeria. That's Wednesday's edition of the Breakfast Show. My name is Kirian Umayo.
And I'm Kingsley Osadolo. It's always good to have you join us on the program. We're broadcasting, as always, live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We are here in the Abuja headquarters studios, and that's Nigeria's capital city as well. In the course of the program, we have our complimentary segments, and these include newspaper review, business, and others. In the meantime, let's take the highlights of the morning news, and here's our other colleague, Blessing Abu. Hi, Blessing.
Yes, it's a KK flight. Good morning, guys. Good morning, and here's the morning news. President Muhammadu Buhari has formally broken his silence over the recent attacks on his administration from certain quarters, saying those who politicize isolated incidents of insecurity are neither patriotic nor have the country at heart. The president stated this while exchanging views with a delegation of the Buhari campaign organization on a solidarity visit.
Is open for business, as no country in the world has achieved rapid economic growth without significant foreign direct investment. We are keeping our currency steady and are adopting pro-business policies to encourage private sector investment. Policies put in place to support farmers and small businesses are yielding positive results, and we are determined to integrate them into the larger economy.
The Senate has called on the service chiefs to immediately commence regular patrol along the highways as part of measures to ensure security of lives and property on the roads. This resolution followed a motion that drew the attention of the Senate to the recent murder of Olufunke Olakunrin along the Akure-Ore Expressway.
Federal Road Maintenance Agency FEMA to accelerate action in maintaining potholes on major federal highways across the country where most of the perpetrators of this evil act of kidnapping and attacks or innocent citizens always hide.
That we all have the role to play in ensuring that normality is restored.
We should have one robust national summit on the security situation of this country.
Meanwhile, the House of Representatives at Tuesday's plenary urged the federal government to put in place more stringent measures to address insecurity on highways across the country. The resolution followed a motion of urgent public importance brought before it by Representative Isaac Adedayo and 9 others.
Please do something urgent to curb this kind of thing in our society.
We need to rise and ensure the security of life and property is paramount. It's across this nation.
If we fight corruption, it's going to reduce these problems we are having.
Those in support of the motion as amendment, please say aye. Those against, please say nay. Ayes have it.
Still on security matters, the Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Tukur Buratai, has charged officers and soldiers at the Kuyilo Super Camp to be decisive and ruthless in dealing with bandits in the area. Defense correspondent Ismail Musa reports that the Army Chief gave the directives while on operational visit to a newly established camp in Birningwari, Kaduna State.
Officer commanding, you must move deep into wherever they are identified, and you must develop the intelligence capability to penetrate. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Away from security matters now, the Presidential Election Petition Court has admitted in evidence the electronically generated evidence where INEC Chairman Professor Mahmoud Yakubu cleared the air that election results will not be transmitted electronically due to communication challenges. Counsel to President Muhammadu Buhari, Alex Izinyo, SAN took the leave of the court to tender in evidence the compact disc and the document containing its certification.
Not all the areas are covered by internet, and that if they do so, some places will not get it at all. And unfortunately, even Section 52 of the Electoral Act says you must never, and you can never transmit election results electronically.
The death of a Nigerian, Dr. Elizabeth Chukwu, in South Africa has continued to generate reactions on the prevalence of such occurrences, despite efforts to put a stop to it. To follow up on the recent case and also discuss new strategies of tackling xenophobic-related attacks on Nigerians, Chairman of the Nigerians in Diaspora Commission, Abike Dabiri Erewa, visited the South African High Commissioner to Nigeria.
We're here to appeal on behalf of the government and people of Nigeria and the family, but for the sake of both countries, we need to know what happened to Madam Elizabeth. For the sake of the family, we need to get a closure to know how, why, when, and what happened to her.
The South African police services are working very closely with the staff and management of Emperor's Palace, the hotel in which Ms. Ndubisi Chukwu untimely lost her life. A video footage has been obtained. It is being studied.
The National Salaries, Incomes and Wages Commission says the federal government is committed to the implementation of the approved 30,000 new minimum wage when negotiation arising from the consequential adjustment is completed. The assurance from the Wages Commission is coming from the concern raised by the trade union side of the joint consequential adjustment in the federal public service, urging the government to reconvene the meeting of the technical committee to complete negotiations. Both sides presented their positions.
For officers who earn salaries above 30,000 per month before 18th April 2019 in the Federal Public Service will continue. The outcome of such negotiations will be implemented with effect from the date an agreement is reached.
The government shall argue that if 66.666 was added across the board to the salary of public service bill, the bill will be too high for the government to bear.
It will be recalled that the negotiation committees were inaugurated on the 14th of May 2019 to ensure every worker benefits from the date the minimum wage was signed into law. That's the news for now. The duo, Captain Kyrian and Kingsley, will be back with Good Morning after this break.
One football confederation, 24 teams, 6 stadiums, 4 cities, 504 African stars, 1 trophy. The Africa Cup of Nations Egypt 2019 comes alive from June 21 with the showpiece final on July 19, 2019. Watch the 52 matches of the tournament live on Africa's biggest and largest television network, NTA, in partnership with Hotsports. Be part of the biggest soccer fiesta in the African continent as the Super Eagles go on a bold mission to clinch the prestigious title for the 4th time to the excitement of millions of fans across the length and breadth of Nigeria. Nigeria's premier sports production and marketing group, Hotsports, partners with the biggest, the largest and the #1 television network in Africa, the NTA, to give Nigerians a memorable viewing experience. Boost fan support for the Super Eagles to glory in Egypt. For inquiries, please contact Abubakar on 0803-331-0175 and Felix on 0803-308-2375. NTA, you can't beat the rich.
Corruption not in my country.
In here is a check of 5 million naira.
What is this generosity for?
My electricity bill is 25 million monthly. But with the help of Umar here, we have been able to keep the costs down.
How so?
I will make a bill payment of 5 million naira monthly and you will look away. And in return, I will settle you with a sum of 5 million naira. And Umar here will receive the sum of 2 million naira for himself and the boys.
You are a big man.
It is the Lord's doing.
Please, can you give me a minute?
Both of you, you have to come with us to the station.
You are looking for investment, oh?
In my bank account? What both of you just did is grossly corrupt. And I said no, not in my country.
Not in my country. This message is from Akinfade Foundation.
Are you aware that your perfect family may be under threat by germs? Germs can cause infectious diseases like diarrhea, typhoid, and flu. These infectious diseases are amongst the biggest killers of adults and children. In Nigeria, tens of thousands of children under the age of 5 have died due to diarrhea caused by germs, which could easily have been prevented. These illness-causing germs are everywhere. Dirty surfaces, on cuts and wounds, on your clothes, in unclean bathing water. To protect your family from germs, use the power of Dettol's 1 capful. For surface cleaning, for first aid, for your laundry, in your bathing water, and to protect your family from up to 100 illness-causing germs. Be Dettol sure.
NTA Television College Jos announces admissions into 2-year diploma programs in film and television production, television engineering, and broadcast journalism. The sale of forms will commence on the 13th of May and run through 30th July 2019. Admission forms can be obtained from all marketing offices, NTA state capital stations, zonal centers, or at the office of the academic secretary, NTA Television College, Rayfield, Jos.
On payment of a non-refundable fee of 7,500 naira in bank draft in favor of NTA TV College. Applicants can also obtain the forms through the NTA TV College portal at www.ntatvc.edu.nj.
Applicants are required to possess 5 credits in GCE or SSCE in relevant areas of study in not more than 2 sittings, including English and mathematics. All properly completed forms attached with photocopies of credentials must be submitted on or before 30th July 2019. For further inquiries, please visit our website at ntatvc.com or call 0803-3144-383.
NTA TV College, training you to be the best you want to be.
Registrar Announcer.
You're still watching Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Now, time for us to take some business stories with the Nigerian Communications Commission, NCC, remitting over 50 billion naira to the Consolidated Revenue Fund of the federal government. Details of this story and others with our correspondent, Comfort Amodu.
Now, we begin with the Accountant General of the Federation, Ahmed Idris, appealed to the national executive members of ASU, NASU, SANU and NAT to embrace coming on board the IPPIS as it is for the good of the nation. The AJF, who was represented by the Director IPPIS, Olubenga, at the interactive meeting with the union executive, sought the cooperation of key players to attain a seamless enrollment in compliance with the presidential directive to ensure transparency and accountability for good governance. He said the IPPIS has the capacity to accommodate over 2 million of federal government employees and flexible enough to accommodate all peculiarities, adding that IPPIS presently has a staff count of 755,422 from 561 MDAs as against 23,858 in 2015. The AJF further explained that the centralized payroll will be prepared by the individual university but coordinated by IPPIS, while the total management of the human resource rests solely with the universities. This initiative by the federal government, financial experts have applauded as they say it is the right step in the right direction.
Our expectation is that it will be very effective.
Meanwhile, the volume and value of electronic payment transactions increased in the first half quarter of 2019 as Nigerian interbank settlement system instant payment recorded the highest transaction with 7.9 trillion naira during the period. Now, the record shows that the volume of NIP transaction rose by 51% to 87.9 million within the period from 57.9 million, while the volume of NIP transactions increased by 23% to 7.87 trillion naira from 6.4 trillion naira in the first half quarter of 2018. Moving on, the Nigerian Communications Commission has remitted a sum of 51.3 billion naira to the Consolidated Revenue Fund of the federal government in the first quarter of 2019. The Executive Vice Chairman NCC, Professor Umar Ambata, said the remittance is in compliance with the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2007. The NCC boasts for the states that the Commission is partnering relevant key players across all levels of government to address identified impediments to investment drive in the sector. Now, let's take a quick look at the closing figures of trade on the floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange. And that's business news for now. Many thanks for watching. I'm Comfort Amodu.
Thank you, Comfort. We appreciate that. Now, next on Good Morning Nigeria is newspaper review.
newspaper reviewer, Bayo Atoyebe is right here with us in the studios. Bayo, good morning and welcome.
Thank you, Kinsley. Good morning.
Yeah,
good
Bayo,
morning,
nice to
Nigeria.
have you.
Good morning, Nigeria.
All right, let's begin today's review with the Nigerian Pilot. The Nigerian Pilot newspaper. Directly below the nameplate, Atiku is a Nigerian, witness tells tribunal. That's on page 8. Don't go on strike, Senate begs university unions. Page 5 is where you get details of that story. And now the lead story. It starts with this alarming. That's the, well, I don't know whether to call it kicker or whether it's going to be Kinsley. You will help me with this. Alarming.
It's the headline.
It is the headline.
The headline itself is also alarming.
Alarming.
Because what is the exclamation?
Exactly.
Exclamation mark doing at the end of...
Screaming headline. Okay, now, it has 4 riders to that. 60,000 Nigerians are stranded in Libya. Nigeria accounts for 10% of abandoned immigrants. 219 migrants are of unknown nationalities. 40,000 so far repatriated since 2015. That's on page 8. And below the photo story there, we have Kwara Assembly to revoke Saraki's houses. That's on page 7. Why crime is happening in other parts of Nigeria, as the president is on page 7. Koza pastor Fatoyimbo under investigation, says Khan, is on page 11. Reps to constitute standing committees in September, ad hoc committee on media. Senate screens tackle for CJN's job today. It's on page 9.
Okay, well, take a look at the Daily Trust newspaper. And Daily Trust newspaper, below the nameplate, there are 3 headlines there. The first comes with a kicker. Minimum wage. Federal government to pay workers earning less than 30,000 naira. That's on page 3. Just building collapse. NEMA confirms 14 dead. IMF chief Lagarde resigns. That's page 17. Now, lead story says, focus on Northeast, heightened insecurity in other parts. That's according to President Buhari, and says those politicizing issue not patriotic. And Jonathan asks government to change approach. The photograph on the front page there is a protest by participants during a rally organized by the Association of Women Living with HIV and the International Community of Women also living with HIV in West Africa to mark the 2019 World Population Day in Abuja. Of course, there's a photograph there. And below that, we have 3 headlines. Reps introduce 41 bills, opt for 102 committees, page 3. INEC, why server wasn't used for 2019 elections, page 14. And pirates kidnap 10 Turkish sailors off Nigeria's coast, page 7. Bayo.
Let's start with the human interest story, and particularly the running story about the building that collapsed in Jos yesterday. 14 bodies, unfortunately, have so far been recovered from the rubble, and they are said to include the body of the owner of the structure, who apparently just came, parked his car opposite the building, went into the structure, and minutes after, the building collapsed on him too. But the authority in Jos have also lamented that the structure was badly put together, and consequently, they have now given directives that the Jos Urban Development Agency will go around the city, and any structure that is detected to be faulty will be marked for demolition. Meanwhile, President Muhammadu Buhari says that Nigeria will not relent in effort to secure the country from criminal activities. While receiving executive of a Buhari Media Organization, the president says those criticizing the administration's handling of security challenges by politicizing it are not being patriotic. He observed that there were challenges of banditry and kidnapping around the globe, and every country has their own security challenges. He said that while progress has been made in fighting terrorism, there have been a new challenge, that of kidnapping and banditry. He assured Nigerians that the administration will not relent in efforts to secure the country from criminal activities. All the resources at the disposal of government will be deployed to protect life and property of all Nigerians, not just only the prominent ones. Meanwhile, former President Goodluck Jonathan has advised a change in approach in tackling the security challenges. While visiting Pa Ruben Fashorati in Akure for condolence, the former president said, every generation faces its own problem, and this generation must solve the problem of kidnapping, which commenced in 2016 as commercial kidnapping. He observed that it moved to terrorism in the north, and now it has become a major problem all over the country. He said the federal and state government must all in conjunction design a different approach for tackling these challenges. Meanwhile, at the National Assembly, the Senate President has also lamented the killing of Mrs. Olakune, describing it as sad and unfortunate. He observed that the security situation is perverse and every part of the country has one story or the other to tell. Senate President Lawan says that it will be the duty of the Senate to hold an all-inclusive national summit to consider the security situation. You will recall that the 8th National Assembly that just expired also held a security summit in February 2018. The resolutions there are still pending. I don't think many of them have been implemented. Meanwhile, Professor Wole Soyinka has denying that he made any comments criticizing the Buhari administration as published and attributed by some newspapers yesterday. He described the headline as especially gratuitous, fictitious, and dishonest. He said it is sad that unprincipled conduct that has been lacking, particularly of people who lack courage to propagate their own personal opinion that have obtained on the social media, particularly during the election, have now found their way into the print media. And therefore, he described the situation as very unfortunate. Meanwhile, there are concerns expressed by federal civil service earning less than 30,000 naira a month about the new minimum wage. However, the chairman of the National Salaries Wages Income Commission says that the law says that nobody should be paid anything less than 30,000 naira, and therefore those affected will have their salaries adjusted immediately. Meanwhile, the others will await the outcome of negotiation by the Joint National Public Service Negotiation Council. And whenever that is done, the arrears will be paid accordingly.
Well, I think it's important to raise this issue again, if you recall, Kirian, during the negotiation for the new national minimum wage, that the financial implication is not necessarily for the floor figure, which is 30,000. That normally you will have a consequential effect on the other levels in the civil service. This is what has come out now. The chairman, executive chairman of the Wages and Incomes Commission, has indicated that the federal government has directed, that's President Buhari has directed, the immediate implementation of all those who are earning less than 30,000 at the moment. That is immediate implementation with takeoff effect from April 18th this year, when the minimum wage became law. But for all others who were before April 18th earning above 30,000, that one is subject to negotiation. It's subject to negotiation. So say, look, okay, what would be the parity figures that each of the other levels would get? And that the figures that you would earn once the negotiations are concluded will not take effect from April 18th, but as at the date of the conclusion of the negotiations.
Well, I think this is become a little bit complex. I don't know how they're going to work this out, and already some sections of the labor are actually, having the thought of going on strike because of this reason. But although I read also that NLC has said that it's not planning any strike at the moment.
Yes, in fact, there are conflicting reports. Those that have declared, given notice, is some group, they call themselves organized labor, and they are reported to have risen from their national executive meeting, and they gave an indication that they may probably be mobilizing for industrial action, and this concerns the need for the salary adjustment. However, NLC President Waba has clarified that NLC has not given any notice of the strike.
Okay, now let's go to the leadership newspaper. Below the nameplate, World Bank, AFDB blacklist 15 Nigerian companies and 9 individuals. That's AFDB's African Development Bank. The story is on page 5 on the new leadership newspaper. Now, insecurity, this is the lead story now. PMB hits back at Obasanjo, says the criticisms unpatriotic. It's on page 4. It has 4 riders to it. PDP demands president's resignation, state of emergency. He should change his tactics, says Jonathan. That's former President Jonathan. And Senate President calls for robust security summit. Return home, NEF, northern groups tell below the photo story. Airline operators lament $3 billion annual capital flight, foreign dominance. Details on page 30. Now, PMB blames state governors for growing number of almajiris. It's on page 12. And Abia Tribunal adjourns over missing exhibits. Senate confirms Tanko as CJN today. It's on page 2. Some Cotonou universities, that's universities, present fake graduates for mobilization, says the NYSC. It's on page 15. NAPTIP arrests school busser, another over rape of students. It's on page 14. Bio, the issue of rape is increasing by the day, you know, and perpetrated by people who ought to have been trusted, or who have been trusted by parents or by relatives and what have you. Why has this continued to? There's no day that comes and goes without the story of rape in different parts of this country.
Yeah, even last week, I think we raised the same issue that hardly a day passes without one report of one rape or the other by uncles, guardians, and even in some sad situations, even parents of their own children. I don't know, the anomaly in society is becoming very reproachful. Yes. But the consequence is that these should be treated as serious offense. And you will recall the other day, the Women Lawyers Association, FIDA, had to come out and demonstrating seriously that rape must be taken as a very critical crime and handled very serious, particularly at the first point of report, particularly in the police station. And they also pointed out that there are instances whereby persons who are in custody are reportedly being also victims of this.
That's right. Rape is a serious offense.
Yes.
There's no doubt about that. It's a felony. And we do hope that the law enforcement agencies will continue to take it very seriously. Plus, of course, the law courts. If a person is charged for rape and the facts and evidence are clear, why drag on the matter?
Is it not possible to amend the laws on rape, you know, to be more stringent and
you want death penalty for it or something?
Life imprisonment is okay too. Honestly, you know, because see, the thing is becoming alarming.
It's an epidemic now. It's an epidemic.
In fact, 1 or 2 states have amended their law and prescribe life imprisonment for rape.
It's a serious matter, and I'm sure that the appropriate authorities once again, you know, will take up that. It's just a trial. That's my main concern. A matter can go on for so long, and what happens? And then what is the attitude of the law itself? Because if the whole idea is to say, look, a rapist is a threat to the society once, you know, he is out there. So the thing to do is, in the course of his trial, what do? Do you grant him bail? Or when you now sentence him, to what length of imprisonment do you sentence him? So that, you know, he doesn't then go out there and continue to pose a threat.
And that also serves as a deterrent, you know, to others.
That's right.
And this is the tip of the iceberg, because of the stigma associated with rape. There are many who are victims who have not even come out.
Yeah, to report.
To report.
That's true. That's true. Okay, let's take our editorial this morning. It's coming from the Daily Sun newspaper. It's at page 15. And incidentally, it says, seamless implementation of the new minimum wage. Wow, that's what the paper is talking about. It says the government must never renege on its agreements with labor unions. It should at all times honor its agreements. Well,
the editorial is premised on an error in the sense that the editorial is saying workers are mobilizing for a nationwide strike. That is not true. NLC president has categorically said that NLC is not mobilizing. Those who are concerned are the joint workers, an arm of the civil service workers that have given indication that they are probably mobilizing for it, and their reasons are not far-fetched. We'll go into their reasons and their arguments, but what the editorial is saying that minimum wage, the struggle for it started in 2011, and it took up to 2019, April, when the president signed that into law before it came into fruition. While the minimum wage was supposed to have been reviewed periodically every 5 years. It took a longer time than necessary. And he says that since May Day, Labour leader Ayuba had promised that it will be implemented, and workers are getting very restless about it. Delay implementation, the editorial says, is uncalled for. It draws a parallel between Nigeria and South Africa. It says in December 2018, South Africa also considered a new minimum wage, and by 1st of January this year, it has already started implementing it. So the editorial is calling on the state, private sector, the federal, that all of them should ensure that the payment is made, in the sense that the 18,000 minimum wage that was there before is not realistic. However, the contention of those, the senior officers of the arm of the civil servant, are saying that government has proposed 9.5% increase from grade level 7 to 14, and 5% for those on level 15 to 17. Those negotiating are saying that if this is taken into consideration, it means that an officer on grade level 7, step 8, will have had an increase of only 5,139 naira only, instead of, if it is implemented by overall 6.6%, it will have increased his salary to about 16,230. And officers on grade level 17, step 8, will be getting an increase of 22,056 naira instead of 88,226. So these are the contention between the government team and also the negotiating team on behalf of the public servants.
All right, Bayo, that's, as we said, I'm sure there will be more issues arising from the implementation of the new national minimum wage. Thanks a lot for being around.
Thank you.
We'll see you again tomorrow. Okay, still Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. We'll take a short break now. When we return, of course, we shall be taking a look at the state of Nigeria's domestic airlines.
They are there at the crack of dawn. They are there busy preparing while we rise for our day. They are there silently, guarding, waiting, listening, and watching. They are there ready in the sky above and the waters below, in the blistering heat of the day, in the dead of night, willing, indefatigable, determined in the defense of the sovereignty of our country. They are our first line of defense and our last. They who have paid the ultimate price in defending us. They are fathers and uncles. They are mothers and sisters and girlfriends and boyfriends. They are brothers and cousins and best friends and neighbors. They are classmates, colleagues, and citizens of this nation. They are our defenders and deserve our respect, our prayers, our thoughts. Nigeria, please support our armed forces.
To the outer framers, the hat tippers, the turtleneckers, the fringe goers, you don't need to hide anymore. Try Dettol Even Tone. It cleans and helps to reduce the appearance of blemishes caused by oil, dirt, and germs, giving your skin a healthy feel for an even better you. Dettol, be 100% sure.
One football confederation, 24 teams, 6 stadiums, 4 cities, 504 African stars, 1 trophy. The Africa Cup of Nations Egypt 2019 comes alive from June 21 with the showpiece final on July 19, 2019. Watch the 52 matches of the tournament live on Africa's biggest and largest television network, NTA, in partnership with Hot Sports. Be part of the biggest soccer fiesta in the African continent as the Super Eagles go on a bold mission to clinch the prestigious title for the 4th time, to the excitement of millions of fans across the length and breadth of Nigeria. For inquiries, please contact Abubakar on 0803-331-0175 and Felix on 0803-308-2375. NTA, you can't beat the rich.
All right, I say good morning, Nigeria, live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. As we indicated, our topic for discussion this morning is on the state of Nigeria's domestic airlines. And to kickstart this, let's take this background up from our correspondent, Aisha Ubali.
The Nigerian aviation sector is no doubt very important to the nation's development. Under successive administrations, the sector has seen reform efforts aimed at making air transport available, efficient and safe. Presently, reforms in the aviation sector have seen the upgrading of infrastructure across the country, which many have commended. While the issue of infrastructure can be said to be improving, not much can be said about the growth of domestic airlines as they are still struggling to survive. As a result of their challenges, the passengers have continued to experience flight delays, cancellation, while new routes are not springing up as expected. Also, local airlines are not taking advantage of BASA agreements to fly international routes that could try to balance the dominance of the foreign airlines in the aviation industry. According to the National Bureau of Statistics, air transportation and storage grew by 10.22% in the first quarter of 2018 from 4.71% and 0.48% in the third quarter of the same year. It is recorded that influx of passengers is more during festive periods. However, to make air transport attractive and viable, it is believed that airliners must work towards improving their operations and services, as customers most times frown at the way air operators cause unnecessary flight delays, cancellation of flights, as well as reviewing their fare, among others. It is also to ensure efficiency and best practices that the Bilateral Aviation Safety Agreement is signed among countries, which will be providing cooperation in a variety of aviation areas, maintenance, flight operations, and environmental certification. With the effort this administration has put upgrading airports across the country, observers believe it is necessary to put the same effort in ensuring that the country has its own national carrier like other countries, both for pride and profit. Others believe that Nigeria can also work on improving safety in the aviation sector as more airlines are introduced. Guest on Good Morning Nigeria will be looking at the state of Nigerian indigenous airlines shortly.
Thank you, Aisha, for that report. Now, joining us in the studio is Mokhtar Osman. Mokhtar Osman is the Director General of the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority. Good morning, sir, and welcome to the program.
Good morning, viewers. Thank you.
We also have with us Captain Mohammed Georgie. He's an aviation expert and also the Secretary General of Airline Operators of Nigeria. We're glad to have you this morning.
Thank you very much.
All right, and joining us from our Lagos network studios, we have, of course, a regular guest, in addition, of course, to the two guests already mentioned by my colleague Kirian. Captain Roland Iyaye. Captain Roland Iyaye is the former Managing Director, CEO of NAMA, that's the Nigerian Airspace Management Agency, and currently Chief Executive Officer of Top Brass Aviation. Captain Iyaye, pleasure to have you again with us on Good Morning Nigeria.
Good morning, Nigeria.
And from our Sokoto Network Center, we have been joined by Abdullahi Saroke, as the manager at Max Airlines. Abdullahi, pleasure to have you with us on the program.
Thank you very much.
Gentlemen, it's a pleasure to have you assembled this morning for this very important topic, looking at Nigeria's aviation industry. Well, in the opening comments, we had earlier raised the issue of infrastructure such as airports, airlines, aircraft, safety guarantees, and what have you. So let's begin by making an assessment of the aviation industry as it is today. I would like to begin with Mokhtar Osman.
Thank you very much. Good morning, viewers, once again. Yeah, the aviation in Nigeria is growing, especially in the area of the commercial activities. Don't forget that Nigerian population is quite huge, almost 200 million people, highly mobile. Nigeria is well placed, and aviation is an enabler for businesses, connecting businesses, cultures, tourism, and so many other things. And this sector has witnessed a lot of growth, a lot of improvement in the area of safety and security. Thank you.
Okay, George, on the same issue of assessment.
Well, I think to know the future, you must know the present, and the present is a function of the past. If we go back to 15th of May 1946, Resolution 682 of the Buckingham Palace, the father of the Queen of England, the current Queen of England, King George VI, established what we call air transport in council, Nigeria, Gold Coast, now Ghana, Sierra Leone, and Gambia. Nigeria owns 68% of the whole consortium. The address was in brochure at that particular time. The question is, any progress or not? Now, it started as a national carrier, the Nigerian Airways, which later on I became the managing director in 1992. Because at that particular time, people don't understand. Nigerian Airways never made a profit in their life because gross revenue was net profit. Whatever you consume, whatever you generate, you consume, government, they pay the bill. So there was no progress at that particular time. Then in 1983, 84, 86, the government said, hey, they are sick and tired of paying Nigerian Airways debt through IAT clearing house. That's why they pulled the rug under our feet. That's why they started seizing our aeroplanes there and there. So the development of the aviation industry did not start as a private concern. It was started as a government enterprise. So there was no culture of accountability, no culture of being a commercial enterprise. That was why we have a problem up to tomorrow. So that's why now we're saying now the private enterprise have come in, they sunk in over $3 billion of their finances. The question is just we look at policy formulation, policy deviation, policy contradiction on the side of the executive. Then the owner syndrome system from the Nigerian is I'm the owner, I'm the sole, the owner, sole proprietor of the entire enterprise. They don't engage qualified people to help them run the organization. It's like a family affair. So it's bound to fail. That's why we keep on having problems, on and on and on. We were advocating before, go to the capital market, then people consign their money, then they home aboard, isn't it? But as long as we continue this owner syndrome, we will never make any progress at all in our life.
All right, Captain George, thank you very much. Incidentally, Kirian, the very critical point that Captain George has raised with regard to the business model in the aviation sector is one that, in the course of having conversations on this topic, keeps popping up. So we'll return to that issue. But before then, let's go over to Captain Roland Iyayi in our Lagos network studios. Captain Roland Iyayi, it's almost as if, we can tick off what the state of the Nigerian aviation sector is, but let's contextualize it. I mean, at a time, for instance, when Nigeria's economy was growing at 6-7%, very little was said about the aviation sector. At the time, the economy went into a recession, and two critical sectors, agriculture and solid minerals, were contributing to the climb out of recession. Nobody mentioned aviation. And today, still, with the indices of the economy, the contribution of the aviation sector is hardly ever heard of. Why has this been so?
Thank you very much, Kingsley. I think it's important to understand that aviation in itself cannot be an island to the economy. Aviation is a function of how well the economy is running. Today, aviation contributes about 0.4% to the gross domestic product of Nigeria. And that is a gross aberration. I mean, we should be talking about anything between 1.5 and 2%, given the population of a country. But you cannot run away from the fact that the major issues that we've had in this industry is based purely on policy formulation and regulation. Captain George has talked about issues concerning the owner syndrome. That could be part of a problem. I think it's important to go to the root of a problem. Because, when you talk about issues that he's raised, I would consider those issues as consequences. So when you go to the root of a problem, you're looking at why we are where we are today. Indeed, if you take where we are or where we were from Nigeria Airways days, Nigeria Airways never needed to have failed. But Nigeria Airways failed simply because the policy of government, allowed it to fail. The reason Nigeria Airways failed beyond everything else, yes, it was set up as a social service. But over time, it has become clear, or it became clear to government, that aviation was pivotal to the economic growth of a country. So it was necessary to empower and empower Nigeria Airways to be able to, actualize that objective. But it was never allowed to because there was a lot of clamor for the deregulation. Deregulation was good because it allowed other players into the market. But having allowed other players into the market, you ended up having a fragmented market with everybody coming in with similar type operations like Nigeria Airways had because it was a model. So you ended up having what we would call destructive competition. That has continued till date because what we have today is a lot of airlines coming in, running the same model, focusing on the same markets, which is why we have between 3 airports in the country, Lagos, Abuja, and Port Harcourt, about 80% of our total air traffic. That is not right. We have about 31 airports in the country. Only 3 airports account for 80% of our total traffic. So that tells me that something is fundamentally wrong with the policies we operate. So we need to look at those fundamentals before we can start talking about, aviation being a major contributor, as it were, to the economy as we talk about growth in different other sectors. As a matter of fact, aviation will not be seen to have fundamentally contributed because, like the DG said, it's an enabler. So when you look at it, the footprint of aviation is across several spectra. The entire spectrum of the economy. So you really cannot take out, when you look at it by way of just the GDP contribution, to say, well, it's not significant. Yes, it's not because of policies. But I think we can do better to say that we can grow our contribution to the GDP to, say, about 2%. Instead of a 0.4% we're at this moment. And that's simply because our policies have not looked at why we're not doing the right things or why we're not allowing the growth that's necessary. If you have 31 airports and you're using 3 predominantly, what is happening with the other 28 odd airports? So I think it's fundamentally important that the policies of government, when it comes to certain areas or fundamentals of aviation, be looked at. And I think that's a major problem we're faced with today besides everything else.
Yes, thank you indeed. Policy of government, not just policy, but implementation of policies. We have been told at different fora, that policies has never been the problem of Nigeria, but in the implementation. Now, Captain Georgie treats the history of aviation industry in Nigeria, and from all he said, we can now understand why the emergence of the private sector in the aviation business space became inevitable. But what matters at the moment is where have we gotten to, based on that emergence of the private sector in the aviation space. And I'd like to ask Abdullahi Saroki, who happens to be the manager of Max Airlines, to come in here. Let's share your own perspective as to what has happened in the aviation industry over time.
Everybody. The industry was liberalized 1983 to 1984, and we've had series of domestic airlines that have come and gone. Uncountable numbers of them have come and gone, and the reason given are still with us today. Most of those reasons that we are facing today are multiple landing. In Nigeria, we have about 8 entry points for the international flight. There's no way you can grow a domestic airline with international flight coming to operate domestic flight in Nigeria. Nothing stopped government from organizing a JV joint venture between the local airline and the international airline. I don't see any reason why some airline will land in Port Harcourt, land in Abuja. What stopped the domestic airline from transiting those passengers out of Abuja to Port Harcourt, out of Port Harcourt to Abuja? Then the operators need to be told again that this industry is highly capital intensive, low profit margin, resulting profit. That you have to grow this industry for a longer period of time before you start yielding result. So what we have seen so far is that most of the operators think this industry is just like oil and gas, where you just come and make money and go back. But this industry takes a longer, the gestation period takes a longer period, between 20 years to 23 years before you can start yielding dividends. So these are the challenges that are facing the industry for now. So as the time continues, we'll start analyzing most of the critical areas that we need to look into so that this industry will not just die.
Well, Abdullahi Saroke, thank you very much. Kirian, Abdullahi says that it's not like the oil and gas industry where you just come and oil and gas is not a cheap industry. Yeah. The investment outlays you make in oil and gas, the investment outlays are huge. You can have a prospecting license, and then what you strike may just be nil or not commercially viable. You can have a mining license, a mining lease as it is called, and the quantity of oil you get may not be sufficient. So if you are investing, for instance, in offshore development, it's a huge outlet. But before we come back to the studios, because the regulator of the aviation industry is here with us, I would like Captain Iyayi to speak more clearly about what it refers to as unfavorable policies, and also to clarify the point about airlines, focusing essentially on 3 routes. Lagos, Abuja, and Port Harcourt. Some persons might argue that, look, those are business decisions anchored on viability. So how does the policy environment impact that? Or more generally, how does the policy environment impact the aviation industry negatively?
Well, thank you very much, Kingsley. If you look at the regime of airline licensing in Nigeria, you are allowed as an airline to come into a country and set up operation, a scheduled operator. Ideally, you provide the Civil Aviation Authority with your business plan. The Department of Air Transport Regulations in the Civil Aviation Authority is actually meant to review your business plan and see to the viability otherwise of it before saying, yes, it is good to go. But obviously what has happened over the years is that this particular department has not necessarily done anything in that regard, which is why you have a situation where airlines will come in, project 80% load factor on day one, and nobody's questioning how and why. So when you look at it, when you have a failure on the part of a department of a Civil Aviation Authority to do the needful, then you'll end up having airlines allowed to come into the system, which necessarily have not shown how they can be viable economically when they start operating. That is a policy failure. When it is you license every airline to operate in the same market where you know there's a finite number of passengers, you're not growing the size of the passengers, then of course, when you end up having a situation where you've allowed multiple airlines in the same finite market, you will end up having what you call destructive competition. Because what it will matter is everybody wants to now have a large market share and not necessarily competitive fares, which will be to the betterment of the consumer. So when you have all of these issues, it falls back to policy. When the market was deregulated or liberalized in 1984, the essence was to give consumers a major choice. Yes, the choice was gotten. With the choice will come increased numbers of passengers. We got that at some point, but it peaked off a couple of years later. Why? Because the particular type of aircraft that was used at the time by airlines became obsolete in no time. Airlines had to refleet. The cost of refleeting itself is a huge cost. So when you look at it, we had a situation where the benefits of deregulation we got initially, and then we've lost. Now, in terms of policies again, when you license an airline to operate specifically, like I said, in these three markets, yes, I mean, it's a choice, it's a business choice, because that's where you have most of the passengers, basically. Abuja is, a political capital. Port Harcourt is an oil and gas capital. Lagos is a commercial capital. So between the three airports in the country, you have mostly the businesses in the country being supported. So invariably, there's a higher gravitation by the airlines into these markets. But indeed, all the other airports have markets, except, of course, the type of aircraft operated by these airlines is way too large to support the size of the markets. So in effect, they don't go into those markets. I mean, there's no point flying a 737 into Ibadan, where you can only pick up about 10 passengers, when you have 150 seats on the airplane. I mean, the 10 passengers can't even pay for your fuel. So when you look at that, no airline is willing to go into those markets because of the size of or the type of aircraft they operate. Now, assuming the Civil Aviation Authority had a policy to regulate and license airlines at 3 different tiers, which was recommended in 2005, what you would have is you will have small airline operators like air taxis operating airplanes about 10 to 15 seater capacity in smaller markets. With 5 to 10 passengers, they will break even. But the same airline cannot be competing on the major routes. So what you'll end up is having a deepening of air travel penetration in the country, in which case the smaller airlines operating the smaller or fringe markets would bring out passengers from those fringe markets into the hubs that would develop, like the Lagos, the Abuja, or the Port Harcourt. So invariably, a policy along those lines, like I said, can change that dramatically. But we have not looked at that. Now, again, when you say to the airlines, you can only operate into these airfields for about 12 hours of a day. Airlines cannot make money operating all these aircraft, with an operating window of barely 12 hours, when the actual time they fly is about maybe 6 hours on the airplane per day. The major airlines around the world utilize their aircraft about 12 to 15 hours on a daily basis. And the reason that is happening in Nigeria is simply because we have airports that are shut down at 6 p.m. for a variety of reasons. Now, that essentially has limited the operating envelope of the airlines. Then add to that, the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority would tell the airlines that, give or take 18 months, you must take your aircraft out for a major check, a C check. Now, that airline from the manufacturers have a recommended interval of about 60 months. The CAA by Fiat reduces it to 18 months. What you're saying essentially is that the airline needs to amortize their investment over an 18-month period rather than a 60-month period. So when you look at all these factors, it is like we are definitely, deliberately over-regulating the airlines, and we're actually trying to make sure they're out of, we run them out of business. So there's a need to look at our policies across the board. The right policies can ensure that most of the things we're talking about today as problems are addressed. In terms of implementation, you need to have people who understand the impact of policies being put in place by government. If they understand the impact, then it will become easy for them to use their discretion in enforcing such regulations. But where you have people who have no understanding of policies, it's a very difficult thing to implement. And I think that's a major fundamental problem we have as well.
Captain Iyayi has raised very, very important, issues here concerning policy articulation as it concerns the aviation industry. And that's why we may have to bring in Captain Mohammed Joji. Would you allude to the policy failure raised by Captain Iyayi, considering also the fact that in the past, after the liberalization of the sector, we had an influx of so many airlines. We've had Concorde, Okada, lately maybe Soliso and others, who grounded, Was it because of this policy failure that Captain Iyayi has raised, or are there other indices, that made it difficult, for players in the sector to maintain steady growth, in the sector?
You see, let me go back to where I worked before in British Airways. I worked for 12 years, from 1984 to 1976. You know, I was a maintenance manager. When I became a pilot, I wasn't allowed to do 2 jobs in BA. So I have to take my pilot license and fly freelance. And I work full-time with British Airways as a maintenance manager. Now, there's a situation whereby they encourage the importation of foreign registered aircraft, newer one, brand new, because most of us here can never afford a brand new aeroplane. First of all, no one can trust you. Remember, financing, they say, oh, Nigeria is a kind of a prior market. Now, you are limiting me the period of which I take this aeroplane in lease. After that period is gone, I'm ended with an archive aircraft. And the maintenance cost, remember, for an aircraft is extremely high. If you consider, although the new aircraft, the cost is high, but the maintenance is very, very low. So the maintenance cost is very low. So now a window must be established to allow a long-term leasing of those foreign aircraft into the country. They say we're doing it out of, okay, fine. You say the Nigerian out of the. Now, you cannot regulate what you don't have. If you say that Nigerians will not be provided with a job, fine, take them out. Where's the job? Have you created anything here? But if you bring those airplanes in, I'm sure you have, the air traffic control area, you make money out of it, the station manager, the staff as well. So you must open up. I've got a circular with CAA United Kingdom asking for foreign aircraft to come out for the United Kingdom. That is CAA United Kingdom. But here there's a limitation. We argue about it, somebody say no, 9 months or 1 year. We say no. Why do you do that? Now, then the other issue is the question of the maintenance facilities. Maintenance facilities here, spare parts to your maintenance, your maintenance facilities. No part of an aeroplane, no part of it apart from what a part of the structure of an aeroplane, everything must be imported. Notes, bolts, and screws. You have to go for foreign exchange. When the Naira collapsed, the dollars. Then you have to put so much bucket of Naira in order to get a dollar. So the importation of spare part. First of all, we had this concession where they say duty-free spares, ground equipment, and spare parts. Up to now, we have problems with some of these custom people. So I'm appealing here to the Control General of Customs to go back to it. You give us leeway to say, okay, duty-free, spare part, aircraft, ground equipment, still we have a problem. Now, that is ASCUDA, they call it. All these little issues, they contribute to give you another kind of, another kind of like a lacuna to us. So to us, the industry, we must be treated as an infant industry. Remember, ab initio, with all the concession we will have. That's one. Number two, the airport itself, the rate here in Abuja, so one time we were 45,000 Naira per square meter. Even in heaven, God will never send you. God will never sell this thing for you, isn't it? So you have to look at all these issues. You have to look at the cost of operating the airline, the cost of the authority itself, the regulatory system itself, the license cost, and so on and so forth. So the cost, if the cost is prohibitive, ab initio, what you call DOA, dead on arrival, you will never make it. That's why you find that from my statistics here, from 1960 to date, there are about 55 airlines gone kaput. I'll give you the statistics later. 55 of them gone. Then we say now, let's go back to generate a national carrier, isn't it? From that 1960 to 2003, there were 10 attempts here. I'll give it to you as well. So I've got all the history. When I'm going, I'll give it to you. So for future, you will sit down and make another program with it. Otherwise, there's no time now to go to all of them because a hell of a lot. What I wrote in Nigerian Airways in 1992, if I give you that, believe me, you will shed tears, the whole lot of it. The indebtedness, the problem we've gone through. It's here, 1992 document. So the issue is simple. Let's go back again, back to the drawing board. Why do we go wrong? How do we move forward? Now, every time seminar, but nothing happened at all. So this time you have to get the professionals, the airline operators, the professional people, sit down with them. But if you open up the whole lot of things, say seminar for everybody will bring his own problem. So create a specific seminar for airline operators and investors, the bankers also. Now they say there was, remember the bailout scheme? They say so many billions were given to bailout. It wasn't for the It wasn't for airlines. The bailout was at the behest of the bank. The airlines, they borrowed so much money they couldn't pay. So the bank go to the government, and the government pay them the money. It had nothing to do with the airline.
All right, but the airlines incur the debts in the first instance. Okay, well, Captain Georgie, you've raised a number of very important points as well. And Mukhtar Usman, of course, you've listened to the complaints by the operators and what they think the issues are. We'll give you the opportunity now to begin to address them one by one. Of course, there are major issues with policy formulation, issues with almost prohibitive levies, fees, taxes, and so on and so forth that, you know, they consider unhelpful to launch and even growth of airlines.
Thank you very much. I've listened to some of the complaints that came in. Some of those were not really policy issues. To begin with, telling an airline where to go is strictly a business decision. Also, the choice of aircraft is also another business decision that the regulator will not get involved. So you cannot talk about faulty policy around that. And also the airports, you know, government has worked very hard to ensure that airports are upgraded, terminal buildings, new terminal buildings, runways are available just for you people to utilize them. If you have only one aircraft operating or one flight operating into an airport, you cannot keep it 24 hours because it costs a lot and so on. As for the operators to take advantage of the infrastructure that has been put in place to operate efficiently. And also we are talking about competition so that we can improve efficiency also in timing. You talked about cancellations and so on. We give customers options to choose, and also the pricing also. So on one hand, you are talking about over-regulation. On the other hand, you are talking of under-regulation, because if you have to go down to that level to say this airline A will only be restricted to this sector, I mean, that is over-regulation, and you are killing the competition. And also, Captain Georgie has mentioned something about Nigeria being a difficult place to get an aircraft into and operate. Yeah, some of the major problems we have, Nigeria has signed what we call Cape Town Convention to help Nigerian operators have access to aircraft leasing, newer aircraft at affordable pricing. Unfortunately, some of the operators have misused the judicial system in Nigeria to go and prevent the implementation of that convention. And that's what is making it very difficult for Nigerian operators to be able to have access to cheap, affordable, and modern aircraft. You know, and with the cheap, with the modern aircraft, you are able to achieve so many things. Take advantage of some of the things we have done. One, reduction in the takeoff minimum. You know, whereby before an aircraft can take off, the weather at where the departure point must be equal to the landing minimum at that departure airport. And when the weather is below that, you cannot take off. So the aircraft remains on ground, and the aircraft is programmed to do other flights. It's not able to do. We're able to successfully do that in line with international standard best practice to reduce that takeoff minimum so that you can increase the capacity and efficiency of the airlines. And also we have put in place the performance-based navigation approaches at landing, which is satellite-based approaches at landing. If you don't have modern aircraft, you cannot take advantage of those facilities. Those that have new aircraft and they have those facilities, they're taking advantage of those, and they're able to operate more flights because they are able to operate even where the terrestrial-based landing and navigation system are not available. You know.
Okay. Okay, thank you a lot. Thanks a lot, Mukhtar Usman. Let's return to Sokoto, where we have Abdullahi Saroki. Abdullahi Saroki, You promised in your opening comments that you were going to do further analysis on some of the crucial matters affecting the aviation business in Nigeria. And you have listened to other guests who have as well raised some very pertinent issues concerning that. And just a while ago, Mukhtar Usman did mention the issue of an agreement that was not properly followed or worked against by the key players, which led to their inability to have access to cheap and modern aircraft to operate in Nigeria. Now, what are your thoughts on this?
Apart from the reason that have been given so far, fuel accounts for 25% of the operating cost, which is not supposed to be. We don't refine this fuel in this country. So what I expect government to do is to sit down with the regulator and see what can be done about it. We have about 3 to 4 refineries. There's nothing that stops government from refining this fuel in this country so that the cost of operating an airline will drop. One. Then on the issue of airline flying to about 4 airports in Nigeria, which is not supposed to be so. We have had issue where we have to refund passengers because the airport that we are going into, because of bad weather, we couldn't go into that airport. Not because the airline is not ready to finance the fueling of that airport, but because the equipment at that airport are antiquated. Nothing stopped the government from providing those facilities so that the airport can be kept running for the airlines. At the end of the day, what happened to the passengers? The passengers were refunded. The passengers that agreed to go to the nearby airport, because the plane couldn't land at that part of the northern airport, it has to go to the neighboring airport. So surface transport has to be provided for those passengers to be able to transport them to those neighboring airport. While some passengers opted out of the journey and they were refunded, but the few ones that agreed were transported to the neighboring airport for them to fly on that flight. So there are numerous challenges facing the domestic airline, which I expect the government and the operator to sit down together and see what can be done about it. Because we've had series of airlines coming and go, and within an average lifespan for an airline in Nigeria is less than 10 years. Why is it so? Why is Air Rwanda making profit? Why is Ethiopia making profit? It's because the government of that country has assisted them in making profit. Okay, like in the case of Rwanda today, what they simply do was to make visa available on entrance for all African citizens. That has increased 50%. That has given back to 50% increase in tourism. That has given back to 85% increase in inter-African trade in that country. So what we want the government to do is to sit with the airline and to reduce all this taxation. You can't tax airline like the way you tax tobacco, the way you tax cigarette. So we have to sit down together with them and discuss on the way out. Thank you.
All right, Abdullahi Saroke, thank you very much. Mukhtar Usman, Director General of the Civil Aviation Authority, who is the regulator of this sector. There were a number of points that both Captain Georgie and Captain Iyayi raised, which I would like you to further address. Captain Iyayi, for instance, was talking about the licensing regime. There are conditions that must be fulfilled by a potential operator. I couldn't possibly come to you now with a 777, just one aircraft, and I said that this is the route I will be doing, and then you give me that. Captain Iyayi was talking about the use of air taxis or so-called city hoppers, and then the various tiers that you need to have. Every person doesn't necessarily have to have a 737 to be able to operate domestically. That's one. That's the licensing regime. The licensing fees, I recall when once we took on aviation on this program, there was a point that was raised about an airline that wanted to fly regional. And the licensing regime ran into millions of, tens of millions of naira for a baby that had not even taken to the skies. Captain Georgie has also talked about, of course, probably some of these ones will not be within your remit, talked about landing and parking fees. And he did cite the example that Almighty God himself wouldn't charge such fees in heaven for you to park your aircraft. So why do we have all kinds of levies and fees? It's as if regulation is also now being conflated with revenue generation.
Thank you very much. I'll start from the last. The charges we have in Nigeria are not alien to aviation. All those charges are done everywhere, and we are expected as aviation to be able to recover our cost. So the charges have not been changed. In fact, for the past close to 7 years, there has not been any upward review in terms of those statutory charges that we do as a civil aviation authority, despite all the changes in the currency fluctuation. Okay, about the licenses, I think I mentioned earlier, you cannot tell somebody you must go to this place, you cannot go to this other place. Once the individual has done his market survey, he has done his numbers, and also he has fulfilled all the requirements, and where he's going to go, the equipment he has can be accommodated at that place. Of course, you cannot take, for example, a 777 and go to an airport that has limitation on 777 and so on. We definitely will not allow it, and so on. So it is not unusual. And talking about landing fees, parking, and so on, anyway, we are not God, so we are asked to recover the cost, because we have to provide the services efficiently, safely for an operation. If the airports or the air is not safe, nobody will come anywhere close to air. And we all agree that air is the safest mode of transport and is the most preferred means of transport. It's fast, efficient, and it's also safe. And I think there was an issue of somebody mentioned multiple designation of airlines and the entry points into the country. The market is huge. African Union took a decision to open up the continent because the interconnectivity in the continent is the poorest in the world. In the days of Nigeria Airways and Air Africa along the West Coast, there was seamless movement of traffic. I have direct flight over that.
We have an increased cost, so the competition is not balanced at all. There was a time I wrote to him, I want to start operating from Maiduguri to Chad. Remember? Because the road is so critical, so dangerous, bandits. And then you have to go through two borders, through Cameroon and so on and so forth. What I had is that I have to pay 5 million naira for route development. I said, what is this for? They say 5 million naira for West Coast, 10 million naira for international. I wrote him back. I said, this is an aberration. Ministry of Aviation gave me a license to fly. You are now restricting me by putting me a cost instead of you encouraging me. If I'm going to fly that international, you know, there's special charges, airport charges, heavily charged in dollars. Landing, heavily charged in dollars. Air route, heavily charged in dollars. So already, I was inundated with the cost, which cannot allow me to operate. Whereas you have ASCAI, can rep us through, you know, start from Cotonou, from whatever, they just go through our passengers. They go through. So us here, so also the policy of charges, we're saying, okay, there is this 5% ticket sales tax. Of course, they are the major, you have the major beneficiaries. That money should be for aviation industry. So what we are asking, as other parts of the world are helping their own country to come and take our money, we also need to sit down and look at what it is here that the operators would like to grow and cut down our operating costs. Because we have a very, very extremely high operating cost. Yes, I understand some of the policies is there, but some of the issues is related to the owners itself. As I said earlier on, this owner kind of a syndrome. There's no proper financial planning. But the banks are shying away from airline. You know that. They call it what you call the airline, the aircraft floating assets. So they cannot use aircraft as security. Most parts of the world, the aircraft are used as security. You are telling me it's floating asset. Of course, you have to fly. So these are the kind of things.
Mukhtar Usman, did say earlier on that there's a roadmap on aviation. But if you think backwards, you will recall that we've had such roadmaps in the past. It's not just in the aviation industry, but in other sectors of our national life, which after a while never, came to fruition or brought anything on the table in terms of improvement in such sectors. So now, it appears that the challenges in the aviation industry are multidimensional from all that we have, all the comments we have made so far. And I'd like to return once again to Captain Roland Iyai, who is a former MD and CEO of Nigerian Airspace Management Agency. Now, there are points raised by our man in Sokoto, Abdullahi Saroki, and that has to do with the obsolete equipment at the airport. He also mentioned that some vital and with operators taking a decision on the way forward in Nigeria. Captain Joji cited Rwanda and other parts of the world where the aviation industry is assisted by government to function effectively and efficiently, and of course to operate, not to operate at a loss.
Thank you very much, Kieran. I think it's important that our government officials understand that aviation is international. And to that extent, that's what you call aeropolitics. I want to disagree a bit with what the DG has said, because he's actually waved off all the issues, pretty much saying that, this is not our responsibility, it's not our business, pretty much. I disagree. Now, the remit of the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority is twofold. One, aviation safety and security, safety oversight, and two, the development of the industry. There's a precarious balance between the two. Now, the truth is, if we go back to what and they realize that if they allow too many operators in that market, then they will have what you end up calling destructive competition. They would rather one airline fail, and then they can now upgrade another airline to replace it. In Brazil has a population of about 212 million, thereabouts. A couple of years back, Brazil had about 18 million as a number of passengers traveling through its airspace annually. It re-regulated part of its industry. And today, as we speak, Brazil has over 120 million people traveling by air. Now, the point I'm trying to make here is, if you recognize the flaws in your policies, I think particularly it's important that people understand their responsibilities. You would understand that if you don't do certain things properly, the lack of what you're not doing, the action or inaction, actually impacts the industry one way or the other, in most cases adversely. In the case of Nigeria, we have 200 million people, barely develop the market. Country
different. I think somebody mentioned about the 5% collected. Yeah, the 5% collected is to enable the agencies be able to pay their salaries, allowances, trainings, logistics, and some other statutory responsibilities. So the 5% is not even coming from the operator, so the operator cannot say that the money is taken from him, and that's why it's having a difficulty. It is from a passenger, 5% from the passenger, and it's shared, as I mentioned, to take care of those agencies' needs. As for the policy, let me still go back to that policy that we have been talking about. No policy has been taken about
crisis.
Key players, to close your thoughts. Are domestic airliners, meeting up with the payment of charges by regulators? Are you breaking even at all in the business? Let's share that with you, because you happen to be the manager of Max Airlines.
The breaking even is global. 1% resulting for profit margin on aviation in running an airline. So it's a global problem. So it's a big problem that if you are operating an airline, you are not looking at immediate profit, because it's a profit that will come after a series of operation. Because if you are selling a ticket for like 30,000, don't be surprised by the time you break the ticket down into pieces, taking the government out of it, taking the fueling, taking the ground handling. What comes to the airline, the passenger that comes to the airline is very little, like 1%. And in the case of Nigeria, where we have a few people traveling, out of a population of 200 million, we have less than 1% of the population traveling by air. So it is very difficult. It's a difficult market to break even. Like I'm saying, why I'm calling government into this game. In the local palace, they say what you are looking for in Sokoto is in your Sokoto. We have about 22 airports, more than 22 airports, and only 4 are viable. And you see some of these state governors going up and they're going to China, going to Europe, looking for investor. And you have tourism potential in your state. We have Yankari Game Reserve. We have Obudukato Ranch. We have Mambila Plateau. If those money goes into developing those tourism, there will be more influx of people going to those states. Then there will be more passengers for domestic airline to carry to those various states. So we are calling on the state government to develop the potential, the tourism potentials in their states, so that there will be more influx of people coming to state. Because if I have a flight going to Bauchi and I have 100 passengers on that flight, I should be able to break the passenger down on the reason why they are going to Bauchi. Because the tourism potential in that state has not been developed, you discover that out of these 100 passengers going to that state, you have about 80% of them going for state visits. You have about the remaining 20% of them going for one function or the other. None of them are going to Yankari Game Reserve. Why is it that way? So the tourism potential of every state has to be developed, so that in return, the domestic airline will pick up from there. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Abdullahi. I mean, I won't have time now to still ask you why local airlines are not flying other, shall we say, unpopular routes. You are in Sokoto. Why are we not having services from Sokoto, direct flights from Sokoto to Port Harcourt, for instance, or from Port Harcourt to Kano, or from Sokoto to Maiduguri? Direct flights. You don't have to come to Abuja, or from Mina, straight to Maiduguri. If you are from Abuja to Mina, it will take you just about 2 hours. You get to the airport, and then you catch a flight that takes you to Maiduguri. That will be a question for another day. Very quickly, back to Captain Georgie. You talked about maintenance and spares. Why has it been difficult for us to have standard maintenance center, maintenance hangars? There was one that was being constructed at Uyo Airport, and it was said to accommodate 747, at least 3 of them, So why has it been difficult for us to have maintenance services in country? I mean, Ethiopian Airlines continues to do it, and years ago, or about 2 decades or so ago, I remember South African Airways, their maintenance hangar in Johannesburg, I was in an aircraft there on a visit, 747 belonging to Lufthansa Airlines undergoing D-checks. What is the challenge with us setting up just a maintenance hangar?
You see, maintenance hangar is not a process of the government. It's the issue of airline itself. If today you have, say, Sky Power Express service like me, I now want to establish maintenance hangar for general aviation, like the one I have at the moment. It's costing me so much money. Spare parts in dollars. Almost everything, notes, bolts, screws, all in dollars. Now, if you say you're going to have a concession, now the question is, a farmer would also like to have a concession in dollars. Other areas would also like a concession. So we are now getting ourselves into kind of a, a situation of no-win situation. What do? So we have to sit down and look at what are the priorities. Although aviation is small in magnitude, but it is a very, very complex industry. It makes the country move. It's for safety and security, as Adiji was saying. So you have to give aviation industry the kind of recognition and the help in order to develop the aviation industry itself. Failure to do that, we shall never develop. Secondly, the route. Before I used to fly Kaduna, Mina, Lagos. Kaduna, Mina, Lagos. I was enjoying myself. Suddenly, Okada came in with the big aeroplane to collect everything. I have to walk up to the route. Once we small chicken develop the route, they just come and grab it. And after all, they abandon it. So they kick us out of the business and they walk out of the system itself. So there must be what we call route protection policy for those who develop it. We're not saying it's a permanent thing you have to do, but at least when you start, they must give you that kind of like protection to develop. You are right. Why should I have to go to Sokoto or somewhere? There must be a link up between Kaduna and Sokoto. I was linked up before with 1930 aircraft between Kaduna and Katsina. I was very proud to tell you before the president, Buhari became the president, he was using that service, that particular time, from Kaduna to Katsina. Unfortunately, now the costs become too prohibitive. You have to abandon the route. Well, you see, so these are the issues which you have. Then the other issues which I'm also asking them, the inspectors who have a problem on that, the DGs here. Now, ICAO stipulates before you become a surveyor and inspector, you must be a licensed engineer with 10 years relevant hands-on experience. What do you have now? Somebody with BSc, MHD, PhD, never hold a screwdriver in his leg. And now coming, no, I'm sorry, I'm not here, it will regulate you. So the cost is becoming so much.
That's the problem. Otherwise,
so the cost is becoming so much. So I like the DG now. Please look into that issue. It's a problem we have at the moment.
I think the DG in the, has said that a new roadmap for the industry is coming, and when that happens, we'll know whether some of these issues have been articulated in that, and see ways that we can change
what
the
road,
trend.
Man, what do you want to put a control on the road or what?
No, to address some of the issues you have raised, and Captain Joji, you, Iyai, and all our guests have raised. So we believe that when that comes on board, that we'll be able to see some changes in the sector. So at this point, gentlemen, we would like to thank you, Captain Joji.
Sorry, the airport here in Abuja, the second runway, please, it's very important.
Okay.
Please, very important.
And he is here listening. Mukhtar Osman is here.
That would mean more traffic into Abuja, with more traffic elsewhere.
No, sorry. The second runway.
There are other airports.
The second runway is for security and the seat of government. Support all the government officials from all over. They came to Abuja.
Thank you.
And that runway is closed.
Captain Mohammed George, thank you very much indeed. Mohammed George, thank you very much indeed for your contribution this morning. Thank you. He's an aviation expert, Secretary General of Airline Operators of Nigeria. He was a pilot. I used to fly in. He was a pilot. I used to fly in.
Oh, God. If you ask me to fly now, I think I'll
fly. All right. Thank you for coming. And we also had the DG of the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority, Mukhtar Osman. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Captain Roland Iyai, former MD, CEO, Nigerian Airspace Management Agency, and currently CEO of Top Brass Aviation. Thank you very much indeed for your insights. And again, from Sokoto, Abdullah Hisaroki, manager at Max Airlines. It's been nice sharing your thoughts on this edition of Good Morning Nigeria. Well, for now, Kingsley, I think we...
All right, so that does it for us on the program. We're back tomorrow, same time, 7 o'clock in the morning. Until then, do enjoy the rest of your day. My name is Kingsley.
And I'm Kirian Umayo. Have a great day.